了乎，今天的客人是谁呢？
青春期的孩子一般给人的印象就是难以沟通，和父母之间常常处于对立状态。面对父母的管教，他们只是觉得烦躁唠叨，不愿意听从和改变。这样的亲子关系如何维系呢？似乎做父母的面临被孩子关在他们的世界之外了。谁来做客制作单位为大家邀请到了2位在湾区长大的孩子，他们以自身成长的环境和说法来分享并且帮助青春期的孩子和父母来彼此了解。靠5岁随同父母从中国移民到旧金山湾区，从此在湾区长大。2010年从 Lynbrook 高中毕业，在大学是主修 statistic。曾经在公司做软件工程师，但是很快就辞职改做高中老师已经有3年了。Brandon 是一位 ABC， 从小就在 Cupertino 长大，也是 Lynbrook 高中毕业。他们俩当时并不认识，在一次因缘际会中，他们共同的朋友穿针引线介绍认识，言谈中发现彼此在青春期成长的挣扎和痛苦的背景，也因此让他们萌生要帮助青春期的孩子的意念。今天优视频道为大家邀请到了2位来到摄影棚，帮助家中正处于青春期的孩子及父母建立更优质的关系。
观众朋友大家好，我是 Ann， 欢迎收看谁来做客。今天很高兴为您邀请到 Carl 跟 Brandon 来我们节目当中做客，欢迎 Carl 跟 Brandon。
谢谢，大家好，大家好。
You both share the same passion about helping the kids, the students, not the kids, especially high school students. Why do you think it's important to help them to find out what they are and who they are, what they want to be?
I think it's kind of like a lot of parents have this desire. They want them to be happy, to be motivated, to be full-grown adults. And so in our experience, or at least in my experience, those qualities, nurturing those qualities, those are the things that you require in order to be more happy and healthy and motivated. And so I think that's on one front, that's what parents are wanting. And then on a personal note, to have those things, you feel a lot more confident, you feel more engaged and excited about life. And so I think that's what I did.
True.
Yeah. And for me, I, like Brandon, grew up in the area, and my parents are also immigrants from China. I went to Miller Middle School and Lynbrook High School, and when I was attending school, I don't remember feeling very confident in myself or very motivated. And many of the skills that Brandon and I learned when we became adults, we wanted to pass on to the younger students so that they may have a less difficult journey towards becoming an adult.
Right, so what's like the biggest challenge you think the kids are having now?
There's a lot of challenges that
Right.
we work with a lot of teenagers now. We see a lot of different challenges. We see challenges at home. We see challenges with themselves. One thing that I will note is a challenge is many teenagers seem to not know where to place their self-worth. So many teenagers think, oh, I want my friends to like me.
Right.
And that'll make me feel good about myself.
Right.
Or I want to get good grades, and that's what will make me feel good. And many students haven't thought really deeply about where do they actually derive their happiness or success from. And they just believe whatever their friends tell them or their parents tell them, and sometimes that leads them down a difficult path. So I guess to answer your question, students not always knowing themselves is a pretty difficult part of growing up.
So how do you help them?
Well, I guess in answering, if the problem is that students don't really know themselves that well, one of the things that we can do is help them to get them to know themselves better, and so a lot of what we do is actually just giving them skills, helping them reflect about things that are or aren't important to them, and asking asking why is this important to me? Why am I doing this? And some students never even think about those questions. They just do something, or they're mindless in how they spend their time.
To follow the trend and what the parents told them to do.
And they don't really think. And so asking them the question of like, well, why do you think that is important to you? Or why are you spending your time? Most often, they've never done that for themselves. So giving them the opportunity to think about that allows them to realize, oh, like I didn't know that was what was driving me. And so now when they talk about it and it becomes exposed, then they can make a decision of, well, do I want that to drive me?
Yeah. So. Many parents want their kids to be very motivated.
Right.
And it sometimes can be hard to be motivated if you're not sure why you are doing something. One family that we worked with, the mom told us she realized when she was growing up in China, she grew up very poor, and she just needed to do well in school because that was the only way to success.
Yes.
She had to survive.
Yes.
But because she was so successful, when she came to America and had her own family, her children are growing up with security. And her children don't need to work so hard just to survive. Her children are asking different questions. They're trying to figure out, what am I passionate about? What motivates me? Who am I? Questions that maybe this parent were less urgent or important during her childhood or during her time.
Right.
And so we see sometimes that being a disconnect between families and children.
Right, so there's a gap in communication between the parents and the teenagers. Yeah. So what do you think that we can help to help with the gap?
There's a lot of things we could do. I think, at least from our experience,
right.
Or my experience as a teenager, was that I didn't feel like my parents understood me. And
that's all the teenagers complain about. But I think, like, because I'm a parent too, a lot of parents are really trying hard to understand their kids and trying to communicate. Yeah. So why is there such a gap there?
Yeah, and I think in working with parents more, we are starting to see the other side of it, which is parents don't feel like they understand their kids. And we are beginning to see more so why that is. And I think one of the biggest reasons is the cultural gap. The language gap, and in other cases also the gender gap. When you have a lot of moms and a lot of younger boys, there's just they're wired differently.
It's so different, yeah.
Right.
One example, one story from my life is my mom is from Dongbei.
Okay.
And when I visit China to visit her, my extended family who lives there, something that they always ask me is, they ask me, 你吃了吗? Did you eat yet?
Yeah.
And when I was young, I didn't understand.
Why do they care about this so
Why
much,
do you care if I ate this? Of course I ate food. And when I got older, I realized that it was my mom's side of the family. It was their way of expressing love for me.
Yeah, they care
about me, because it doesn't really, they're not really asking, have you eaten food? They're really trying to say, are you okay? Can we feed you? Can we take care of you? And that culture gap, like Brandon is saying, exists for a lot of ABCs or for a lot of parents who bring their kids over. And the kids sometimes don't always hear that, and so they feel misunderstood, or there's a language barrier that prevents them from understanding. 你吃了吗? Did you eat? So it can sometimes mean, I care about you, I love you.
Right. But how can we communicate more effectively if there's such a cultural gap there?
Yeah. One of the suggestions we offer when we do workshops for parents is we ask parents to create something called neutral space and neutral time. And the idea there is, I remember fighting so much with my parents that anytime my parents came into my room in my home, my body would actually tense up and my brain would be worried and scared.
Why is that?
Because when you associate a person with fighting and shouting so many times, anytime you see them, even if they're not about to fight, even if it's just eating dinner, your body has learned, this person in this environment, we usually have bad interaction. I don't feel good. And so most of my relationship with my parents is negative. And so creating neutral time to solve something like this, to work to heal something like this, creating neutral time is, we would encourage parents to take their teenagers out or to take their children out to a neutral location, a neutral space, or even a positive location. For example, go get boba. And the teenager wants to drink boba, it's more positive, and when the parent sits down with them, they can have a more calming conversation.
Sure.
And the student may learn to start to disassociate, to start to have positive feelings towards their parent, because now they have more experiences of positive interactions.
That's a great idea. That's such a great suggestion. Yeah. Other than that, any other tips?
Well, I mean, even from my experience growing up, my parents used to create like a Bible study time once a week, and that was our version. It was like family time on Sunday or Friday evenings. And so once a week we would we would do Bible study as a family, and there was open-ended time to just spend time as a family that wasn't about how come you didn't do good on this test, or like why are you spending too much time on the computer. It was just dedicated time where we could just relate to each other as a family.
Yes.
And that's another example of
just casually chatting.
Yeah. And so commenting on or adding on Carl's point, I remember maybe 90% of my interactions, it felt like 90% of my interactions with my dad was that he was yelling at me. So that means that if there was no neutral time, that probably would have been like 99%. And so that would mean that I would just, every single time I see my dad, I'm like,
I don't want to talk to you.
I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. And so the purpose of neutral time would be to increase the time at which I don't feel mad at my dad or stressed at him, or whether it's my mom or not.
Right.
And so maybe if you can get that to 50-50, 50% of the time you kind of enjoy hanging out with your family, and then the other 50%, okay, maybe not as fun. But if it becomes more spaced out and spread out evenly like that, then it's easier to connect.
Right,
and take the time to want to understand.
That's true, that's true. Such a great idea. And you just mentioned that you spend a lot of time, your parents criticize a lot about you spending a lot of time on the computer. I think that's one of the big concerns for the parents too. But I think it's not just about the computer or video game or social media. I think it's more about the addiction. Like parents are more worried about the addiction. So in terms of addiction, what's your intake on it?
Both of us grew up here, and both Brandon and I had a lot of struggles with being addicted to things. For example, I played a lot of video games.
You did?
I used to set an alarm clock. My parents wouldn't let me play too much, and so I used to set an alarm clock for 3 a.m. in the morning. And then when it would go off, I'd quickly turn it off, sneak into the living room where the computer was, play for an hour, and then go back to sleep, so I get an extra hour of playing time. So bad for my health, so bad. But that's how absorbed I was by my game.
Right.
And something I wish maybe parents could understand a little bit better about for many of the students we work with is we don't just play video games because they're fun. Many times video games are, for teenagers, a sense of escape and freedom because we don't feel good about ourselves. I played video games because when I logged into my video game, I was really good and I felt really powerful. So when I log in, people on the game would say, "Oh, Carl, you're here, join my team, you know, you're so good." But then when I go to school, I don't feel good. I'm not the best student. I'm not the most popular student. I'm not the best athlete. And games was my way of feeling good about myself.
But then at the same time, the gap between reality and the game world might be an issue too, right? What do you think about it? Yeah.
What do you mean? What is the gap that you're referring to?
Yeah, because you're feeling good, then but at reality you're not that good. So how do you cope with that? Do you think that's good for the kids? Or?
I don't know if that's as a dynamic is a good or a bad thing.
Right.
I think it exists. I think it exists, and it reveals something. Sort of like
it's a symptom.
Yeah. For myself, it was many of the reasons that Carl mentioned, but also I felt like I had more control in my video game.
Yes.
I felt like there was a consistent sense of getting better and making progress. And it was very easy and clear for how I could do that in a video game, but it was not clear how I could do that
in the real life.
Yeah. And so that's, for us as people who are wanting to work with teens, I think that signaled to us that, oh, if we can help teens find ways to change,
to make progress,
to make progress in the world, and show them, hey, this is the button you have to press to get more of this thing, but in real life, then real life could be more engaging. And so is the gap good or bad? I would hope that, I don't want the gap to exist.
Right.
But the fact that it does, I think, signals that there is a crisis happening if young people, many young people are addicted to video games. There's an issue with how they are interpreting the world around them. And the challenge is not telling them, you need to stop being addicted to games. How can we support you to help you change your environment so you feel the same kind of control you feel in the video game?
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a student come to, we had a family come to our workshop last night that we do for parents, and the family told us they had a child who played a lot of, this child recently started playing one game that he was very interested in, and the parent shared with us, my son plays this game, and I asked him why, what's so fun? And my son said, this is the only thing in the world that I can be one of the best in the world at. Because in this game, the son was, maybe the top 1,000 players in the entire world, and felt good. And that is the situation that Brandon's kind of alluding to, where if a child has to use a game to feel good about himself and to feel like he's successful, that maybe means that there's a gap between him being able to get that in other parts of his life.
Yes.
And it's helpful for the parent to say, oh, maybe why do you feel like you can't be successful in other areas? You can still be successful. And we think that sometimes it comes down to different definitions of success.
Sure.
I wonder how many parents know what their teenager's definition of success is.
Yeah.
And if the teenager feels like he or she can achieve that.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know, right? And other than video games, I think the other big concern is about social media. The excessive use of social media nowadays is really a big concern.
Yeah, I think when we're just talking about the idea of addiction and how to help young people with addiction, I think the research or literature, I haven't read too much research and literature, but from what I have read, the easiest way to break an addiction is you actually have to replace it. You don't just stop doing something.
Yeah, if you stop it, they want it even
more.
more.
Yeah, exactly. So like stopping something cold turkey, whether it's like, just not even talking about screens and video games, it's like take real world problems of like alcohol and smoking.
Yes.
People try to stop immediately and don't replace it with anything. They usually
it's even worse. Yeah.
Right? And there's entire support groups built around this, and there's a whole culture that's built around replacing your habit and replacing your addiction.
Yes.
And I think, at least when we hear parents talk about how do I get my kid to stop getting addicted to these things, there's very little conversation about what can they replace it with. And I think that is, at least from Colin and our experiences, we were both very addicted to video games, and we stopped getting addicted to video games when we found something that was more interesting.
So what are the options that you would suggest the parents to try to encourage their kids to do, the replacements?
There's no one thing that would work for every child. What I think could be helpful is something that we suggest to parents, where we suggest to parents, you want to set a limit for your child, but also give them freedom. Yes. And what we mean by that is we say, what if a parent said to a child, this weekend you can't play any video games, but you can do anything else you want. So if you find any activity online, or if you hear about any event you want to go to, if you want to watch a movie, whatever it is, I promise I will pay for it, I will drive you there, I will let you do it. And giving teenagers that freedom to choose can start to help them find what their own interests are. And the parent can draw a box and say, do not cross this box, or no video games. But anything inside that box, you're free,
you're okay.
To do. And that helps the teenager. The first weekend, maybe they pick something that they don't really enjoy. Maybe the second weekend, they pick something that's a little bit better. And the third weekend, and the fourth weekend. And naturally, over time, you teenagers maybe understand themselves better and find something that's closer to what they want to do. And then it's easier to use that to replace video games because they've already found something.
That's so true.
Yeah, because oftentimes I don't think there's dedicated space in many of the teenagers' lives that we are currently working with. They're so jam-packed with academics and tutors and prep classes that they don't even have a chance to explore and try something fun. And so that is something that parents can do to actually help create by creating some kind of situation like that where, you know what, for this block of time, do anything but something that is distracting. And do something to nurture your own interests. And having permission from parents to do that, I think, is one of the reasons why I think students don't do more of it. Because if they were to do something that was non-academic, most parents would be like, well, what does that have to do with your grades?
You're wasting your time.
Right, exactly.
This will help you get into college.
Right.
And so if there is help and support from a parent saying like, I'm going to give you time where you can do something non-academic, that will, like, that's half the equation.
Giving that permission.
That would be great. But do you like recommend them to do as a family or just let them do with their friends?
I don't have a strong opinion as to either which one's better. I think it's really, for me, it would really come down to what the teenager wants to do more and is more easily engaged by.
Okay.
For some teenagers, maybe they have a sibling they really want to beat, and so doing an activity with a sibling where they're competitive may be more addictive than a video game.
Right.
For some students like me, I just wanted to be independent from my family. I wanted to show them I was an adult, and I would have wanted to do something just by myself or with my friends. So I think it depends on the personality. Yeah.
Then back to the social media. So I think a lot of teenagers are feeling a lot of pressure from social media. So how do they cope with that? Because that's not something we had when we were young. So it's really hard for the parents to help with them to cope with the pressure from social media.
Yeah. Social media pressure can come in a lot of different forms, so I can't speak to all of them. But one thing I will say is one of the reasons we see teenagers are active on social media and messaging their friends and posting videos is oftentimes because they're trying to they're at a young age where they're trying to figure out, who am I? Am I accepted by my friends? Do I belong? Am I a popular kid? They're really trying to navigate questions about their peer group, their friends, and where they fit in the social status.
Yes.
And social media is just the outlet for some of that. It's I need to talk to my friends so that I still have a good relationship, so that they still think I'm cool and popular and funny. And if that is the situation, the question that we might ask our students, and the question that parents could help their students think about, help their teens think about, is what sort of person do you want to become? What is important to you as you go through puberty, as you're getting older and becoming a young adult? Who do you want to become? Do you want to be a popular person, a funny person? Do you want a lot of friends to like you? Or are you okay if you just have 3 or 4 friends who are really, really close to you? And for teenagers who don't know the answer to that, it's maybe easy to keep up appearances and do everything they can to talk to everybody, try to meet everybody. That's what I did in high school. But that was because I didn't really think about who I was and who I wanted to become. And if I had known that, if I said, you know what, I don't care that much about being popular.
Right.
It would have been easy to convince me, well, Carl, if you don't care that much about being popular,
you don't have to spend so much time on social media.
Then why are you on social media talking to people all the time? That's not that important, according to you.
So that's just back to the core problem that they need to figure out who they are and what they want, right? And also, I think the third main concern for a lot of parents is about relationship. Yeah, it's hard, right? Yeah. It's hard for high school students. Yeah. So how do they maintain a good relationship?
With their parents? With their
with the friend, with a boyfriend, girlfriend. Yeah.
I can start.
Yeah.
We talk about this with our students. It's a very popular topic because many students, they're 13, 14, 15. They're going through puberty. They're starting to think about boyfriends, girlfriends, and things like that. Am I pretty? Am I good looking? Am I good enough? And one thing we once heard from a parent that we thought was really funny was this parent told us, it's kind of weird how some parents say, you can't date in middle school, you can't date in high school, you can't date in college, but once you graduate college, you better get married fast. And sometimes that's the pressure that we feel.
Right.
And if you look at it from the outside, that does seem a little bit strange. If you've never dated, then how can you possibly know what it's like to be a good husband or good wife or good boyfriend or girlfriend?
Yeah.
To be good at anything, you need experience, and you need to fail, and you need to learn. And so our perspective and our advice to parents is, it's true that relationships can be a big source of stress and distraction, and we're not saying everybody should date in high school, but we also don't think that, I don't believe that teenagers should not date until college or after they graduate, because if you don't have that experience, then a lot of teenagers will never have, maybe if they only date in college, then the parent isn't there to help give them advice.
That's so true. Yeah.
If they only date after college because the parent was so strict, then the first few relationships might end up really badly, and they might be really hurt because they didn't have the early experiences of learning when they were younger.
So when it comes, just better cope with it and stay there to support them, right?
Because it's natural. There's no.
If you say no, they want even more.
Yeah, If you say don't do it, then it suddenly becomes.
Let's do it.
Why does my mom not want me to do it? That's so interesting. I want to do it.
So what do you think, Brandon?
I think it's because every teenager is different.
Yes.
It's hard to say for every teenager what general advice you should give them about having a good relationship.
Yes.
I think some students are not ready for a relationship, and they're just doing it because all their friends are getting into relationships. And then there's other more thoughtful teenagers who have really thought a lot about, you know what, I notice all my friends are getting into relationships and I want to be in a relationship. I don't want to be like them. And so maybe they're more thoughtful about being in a relationship, and maybe they are able to think deeply about it and be intentional about it. And maybe that's worth supporting. I don't know. And so I think what I guess my general advice would be, like, how is your relationship with your own kid, and how are you creating open lines of communication to know why is your kid getting into a relationship? Because without knowing, it's hard to know how to support them.
Yes, it's more about communication, not just criticize them and say no to them, right?
Yeah, because who knows? Maybe one of them, they're just rebelling against like what the parents are saying, and so they're getting into a relationship, and maybe that's not very wise. But
in that case, you just say yes, go get a boyfriend, girlfriend.
That's true. And then we'll do it. Reverse psychology. Sometimes that works too.
Right, but yeah. Also, other than that, I think teenagers tend to be moody. I think it's totally understandable because of the hormonal change and the physical change.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard for the parents to cope with the moodiness. So is there any advice that you will give the parents? I know it's a hard question, but it's desperate in need.
I don't know if this is advice. This is just what I would share, which is I would hope parents to know that that a lot of the moodiness, not all, but a lot of the moodiness is biological, is hormonal, and will pass.
Yes.
I think sometimes parents see a moody teenager and they're worried that this teenager there's something wrong with them, that they're too angry too easily, they get too upset too quickly.
Right.
And that may be true for some students. And I wish more parents were accepting of the fact that as a young child growing up to become an adult, everybody passes through a phase in their life when their body changes, and when their mind changes, and when their thoughts and feelings change. And there will always be, you will always have like a teenage kind of period. And I would hope for parents to know that other families are going through that too. And it's a common experience. It's not something that's wrong with their family or their child.
Yeah, so a support group for the parents might be helpful too.
Yeah. And to share that story so that other people know, hey, actually you have this situation. Wow, okay, that's like my situation. Maybe we're not so, maybe my child is not so strange.
So when the kids gets moody, what should the parents do?
Yeah.
It's a tricky question, huh?
Yeah.
It's a tricky question because it's hard to deal with things that are in the moment.
Yes.
Because emotions are high, and not only are emotions high for one person, there's emotions high for both people.
Everybody's angry.
Yeah,
right?
both ends.
And if two people have high emotions, and neither of them know how to handle their emotions very well, then the best thing to do is actually walk away. Right?
So cool down a little bit.
Because if both people don't know how to handle it well, then it's just going to be very messy.
Yes.
If one person knows how to handle it well, then maybe at least that can help de-escalate and maybe not make an argument out of it.
Sure.
But in our experience with teens, most of them don't know how to respond very well in working with a lot of parents. Parents are also working on that. It's not easy.
Yes.
It's a lot easier said than done to manage how you feel when you're frustrated and annoyed and tired at the same time. And so I think my specific suggestion would be learn to recognize when those moments are happening and learn to revisit them later, because it is complicated. And
it is.
I would add to Carl's point that just as a former moody teenager, I remember my mom specifically saying that I was so moody, and I would always be offended by it, even though she was right. And I think it was just because there were so many parts of my life that I was not proud of, that I was wanting to make better, but didn't know how to. And it seemed like every single time that my parents talked to me about something about my life, it was another reminder that there's yet another part of my life that is flawed. And so that's why I wasn't moody because I was a moody teenager. I was moody because I felt so disappointed with myself. And each time my parents brought it up, I had another reason to be disappointed with myself.
Yeah.
And so I share that to maybe help parents empathize more, that I don't think teens, that's my guess, I don't think teens are I don't think they're trying to be moody to piss off their parents.
Yeah, no,
I
definitely
think they're
not.
moody because the circumstance is difficult.
It is.
And they don't know how to handle it.
It is.
And what I was wanting at that time was support.
Yeah.
I was wanting non-judgment. I didn't want my parents to yell at me. I wanted them to be able to look at the things that were messy in my life and for them to still say, I still care for you, I still love you, I still support you. I don't think I ever heard those things. I just kept hearing, why is that not done yet?
Yeah.
What about this part? What about that? Why are you not, what about your attitude? And why are you being disrespectful while I'm pointing these things out about your life?
Or the
And it's just
criticism.
like, yeah, and so it just kept feeling like a laundry list of things that I was not good at.
Sure.
And so I think if parents could keep that in mind, that the life of a teenager is very complicated.
Yeah. It's hard.
And it's not to say that the life of an adult is not hard, because we have all our own challenges, but young people are even less equipped to deal with those
less
challenges.
experience, less skills.
And have even less support because all of their friends are just as clueless. Whereas adults, we have more skills and ability to do that. So to have an adult that is supportive in their life is rare.
Yes.
I remember having only 2 adults in my life that I felt I could trust, and they weren't my family. And so I could never feel like I could talk to them on a regular basis. And so if parents could help play that role more, that would have done so much for me.
Thank you so much, Carl and Brandon. You give us so much helpful tips. That's really good. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
也谢谢观众朋友们今天的收看，有朋来访不亦乐乎。我们下期节目再见。
谢谢，再见。
Okay.